Welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. Wherever you are, nestled into a warm bed, resting your head against a train window, or simply letting the evening settle around you, this is your time to drift into a gentler rhythm. In this episode, we'll travel back across the centuries, across oceans, and into a world where survival hinged on salt, sails, and luck. The world of the 17th century whaling ship. But unlike the bold captains or romanticized seafarers you may have seen in paintings or films, we won't begin on the deck of command. No, you're not the captain in this story. Tonight, you're just a sailor, one among many, and you are about to discover why you wouldn't last a day at sea. The air is thick with brine. The deck beneath your feet groans with every wave. The scent of tar, tobacco, and slowly rotting wood clings to everything. The work is endless. The cold is biting, and the pay paltry at best. This is not a story of triumph. It is a slow unfolding of toil, of salt, of struggle, of strange superstitions, strange creatures, and stranger men. Let your mind gently settle into the roll of the sea. Let the canvas sails above you flap like sleepy lullabies in the wind. Tonight, you're going to sea, and you may not come back. Let us begin. Imagine yourself waking in darkness. Not the peaceful darkness of night in your room, but the suffocating dark of the ship's hold, where air is thick and movement limited. You sleep in a hammock that swings with the ship's every motion, your blanket damp, your clothes unchanged for weeks. It's morning, though you can't see the sun. Above deck, the icy Atlantic wind greets you with no ceremony. It cuts through the holes in your coat. You've been at sea for 3 months now, and the sight of land is but a memory. You are one of 50 or so sailors aboard a 17th century whaling vessel. The ship is Dutch, or English, or perhaps Basque. The nations may vary, but the ship is always wooden, creaking, and cruel. Your duties depend on your rank, though few here feel anything close to prestige. You may be a deckhand, charged with scrubbing, mending sails, and manning the lines. The rope leaves coarse, permanent scars on your palms, known among sailors as hard-earned tattoos. Or perhaps you work in the galley, near the firebox, where even the privilege of warmth is outweighed by the suffocating stench of salted meat and boiling beans. There is no true rest. Each day begins with labor and ends with labor. And always, there is the hunt. You sail not to explore, but to harvest. To harvest whales. And that harvest is brutal. When a whale is spotted, usually by the lookout perched in the crow's nest high above, it sends the ship into sudden, frantic motion. Boats are lowered. Men grab harpoons. There is shouting, but not panic. These men have done this many times. And yet each time feels like a prayer. You are likely not in the boat that goes out to strike the lawyer. Only the strongest or the most trusted are given that task. You, however, are part of what happens after. When the whale dies, the real work begins. The body is hauled alongside the ship, tethered with great ropes. There it is flensed, stripped of its thick outer layer of fat and skin. The blubber is carved with long, two-handled knives, pulled away like massive sheets of dough, and fed into the tryworks, a set of large iron cauldrons that boil the fat down into oil. The smell is unforgettable. Thick, oily, pervasive. Some sailors say they never stop smelling it, even decades after returning to land. The decks become slippery with grease. The scent of burning whale fat fills every crevice of your clothing. It coats your throat. It becomes part of your very skin. You eat quickly. Now, let the sails of history carry us into deeper, darker waters. It is the year 1819. Not so far removed from our previous setting, yet close enough that much remains unchanged aboard a whaling ship. And aboard one such vessel, the Essex, the sea would unfold a story so grim, so drawn out in its suffering that it would echo in literature forever. You may recognize the name, for it helped inspire Herman Melville's Moby Dick. But the real Essex was no myth. It was a small whaling ship that set sail from Nantucket and never returned the same. Imagine now that you were among the 20-man crew setting off from Massachusetts, bound for the rich whaling grounds of the Pacific Ocean. The ship is modest in size, barely 100 feet long, and every inch of it smells of rope, pitch, oil, and age. Your captain is George Pollard, Jr., young for his role, just 29. His first mate is Owen Chase, ambitious and detail-oriented. Others aboard are seasoned whalemen or green hands learning as they go. You settle into the routine we've come to know. The long weeks at sea, the endless waiting between whale sightings, the discomforts and dangers that become ordinary. Months pass. You round Cape Horn, the treacherous tip of South America, and emerge into the open Pacific. There, nearly a year into the voyage, in the far-off waters west of South America, the Essex meets her fate. A whale, an enormous sperm whale, some say over 85 feet long, rises from the sea. It behaves unusually. Some accounts say it stared down the ship before charging. Yes, it charged. Once. Then again. The Essex is rammed by the animal with such force that it begins to sink. Panic follows. Provisions are gathered hastily into 3 small whaleboats. No lifeboats here, just the same open craft used to hunt whales. Now your only hope for survival. There is no radio, no rescue. Just the open ocean, stretching in every direction, and dwindling supplies. The crew of the Essex, now survivors, set out in 3 boats, attempting to reach the coast of South America. But currents and winds are not in their favor. Days pass, weeks. The sun scorches by day, the cold bites at night, the salted pork spoils. The hardtack runs out, rain rarely falls, and the water barrels begin to dry. They try to eat leather, clothes. Eventually, they turn to the only resource.
Owen Chase, the first mate, kept a detailed account of the ordeal. His descriptions are calm, meticulous, detached. He speaks of the death of cabin boy Owen Coffin, young and unlucky, chosen by lot, and executed by his own shipmate, who wept as he pulled the trigger. Captain Pollard was said never to speak of it again. 3 months passed. Of the original 20 men aboard the Essex, only 8 would survive, rescued when their skeletal forms were discovered curled in the hulls of the drifting whaleboats, surrounded by bones. They had survived by clinging to each other and by surrendering the last shreds of the world they once knew. It is a story of the sea's indifference, of human desperation, and of the fragile thread between endurance and erasure. And yet, for all its horror, the tale drifted into literature, softened, abstracted, woven into the obsessions of Ahab and the symbolism of a white whale. But here, we remember the reality, not as a tale of monsters or metaphors, but as men, cast adrift under a pitiless sun, their lives unraveling inch by inch across the vast blue silence. Take a deep breath now. Let the waves quiet again. Let the horror pass by like a distant ship on the horizon. And as we leave the Essex behind, we turn now not to the men, but to the remains of their vessels, caught in ice, frozen in time, preserved for centuries in the deep, cold silence. Now, we drift northward. The sea grows colder. The skies dim earlier. The wind whistles with a strange and mournful song. Here in the Arctic Circle, the business of whaling became something altogether more extreme, more punishing, more mysterious, and many ships that sailed into these frigid waters would never be seen again. But some would be found centuries later. Imagine yourself once more as a sailor, but this time aboard a 19th century whaling ship bound for the icy reaches of Baffin Bay or the Beaufort Sea. The year might be 1820, or 1850, or 1870. The details shift, but the experience remains stark. You are wrapped in layers of wool and rough linen, your breath frosting in the air. Beneath your boots, the deck crunches with frost.
The rigging above glistens like spiderwebs of ice. Food freezes solid. Water must be thawed before drinking. The days grow shorter until light becomes a precious fleeting visitor. The hunt still drives the voyage, but now the enemy is not only the whale, but the cold and the ice. The Arctic ice, vast unmoving sheets of it, relentless, cunning. Ships become trapped. At first, it seems temporary. The crew hacks at the ice. They wait for a thaw. They ration supplies, but the ice does not yield. The days pass, then the weeks, then the months, and some of these ships are never freed. They are abandoned, or they vanish, or they are crushed slowly, audibly, as the pressure from the ice snaps their beams like twigs. In recent decades, archaeologists have begun to find them again, silent, preserved. One of the most haunting discoveries came in 2014 and 2016, with the locating of the HMS Erebus and Terror, ships from the doomed Franklin expedition of 1845, which set out to find the Northwest Passage. Though not whaling vessels, their fate mirrored that of many a frozen ship, trapped in ice, lost and left behind. When Terror was found, she was eerily intact. Her timbers solid, her iron anchors still held fast. Beneath the decks, porcelain dishes still sat in cupboards. Boots rested neatly in corners. The silence of abandonment was absolute. The ice had kept her secret. For over 160 years, in Greenland and Canada's far north, Inuit oral histories told of ships crushed and men wandering, starving across endless white. Some survivors may have lived among the Inuit for a time, adopting their ways, but most simply disappeared. In the wrecks, archaeology on some remains, Mock suggests the final, unspeakable measure. Once again, the sea, especially the frozen sea, offered no comfort. Whalers who ventured north faced these same perils. The whales they hunted were different. Bowheads and narwhals whose thick layers of blubber offered greater reward. But the risk was absolute. For months at a time, these sailors lived on ships frozen in place, hunting seals on the ice, keeping fires burning in the belly of the vessel, trying not to go mad from isolation. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes the thaw came and the ship broke free. But other times they simply vanished. A name scratched on a logbook, a fragment of wool, a bone in the snow. That is all that remained. And still more ships are waiting beneath the ice. Some have not yet been found. They rest in silence, preserved in that deep and breathless cold. The decks still littered with barrels, with boots, with lanterns long since burned out. A museum beneath the ice, a graveyard of ambition. And all of it, every broken mast and frozen plate, tells the same quiet story of men who tried to master nature, and of nature, patiently, silently, reclaiming them. Let that silence drift over you now, like falling snow, like frost gathering on a forgotten hull. And as we leave the ice behind, let us return for a moment to warmth, to the interior of the very ships we've come to know. Because not all lives aboard were lived on deck. Some, high above the toil, dwelled in warmth, in comfort, in leather-bound books and brandy. Let's explore the other side of the story now. Now, let us step inside. not into the wind-whipped decks or the freezing lookout posts, but behind a closed door. A door made of heavy oak, fitted snugly to keep out the cold and the salt. This is the captain's quarters. Though still aboard the same whaling ship, rocking on the same sea, pitched beneath the same sails, the world inside this room is markedly different. Here in the aft of the ship, tucked beneath the poop deck, is a sanctuary. The captain's cabin is, by comparison, quiet, ordered, even comfortable. Imagine stepping into it. Your boots thud on wood planks smoothed by polish and age. A lantern sways gently from a ceiling beam, casting a soft amber glow. The scent of beeswax, lamp oil, and damp paper lingers. Against the far wall stands a sturdy desk, often bolted in place to prevent movement with the waves. On it, charts, a brass compass, a set of dividers, perhaps a leather-bound journal in which the captain writes each evening, noting coordinates, weather, crew conduct, and sightings. There is a bed, more like a built-in berth, tucked neatly against one wall. It is narrow, but it boasts clean linen, a woolen blanket, and perhaps even a feather pillow. The mattress is raised to stay above the damp. Privacy curtains, too. On some ships, there might be a small bookcase. Books were the captain's quiet companions. Logs of previous voyages, nautical almanacs, religious texts, and the occasional novel. Melville, Defoe, Shakespeare. Tea might be served here in heavy ceramic mugs, and on fortunate evenings, a small glass of rum or brandy. Sometimes a warm meal, brought from the galley and eaten alone, while the crew dined on salted pork and hardtack below. The captain's quarters were not extravagant, but within the context of a whaling ship, they were a haven. More than comfort, the space afforded something else: solitude. Unlike the crew, who shared cramped quarters and hammocks strung shoulder to shoulder, the captain could withdraw. He had space to think, to chart the course, to make decisions alone. And yet even this small luxury carried its own weight. The captain bore the burden of every decision. When to pursue a whale, when to wait, when to abandon a hunt or risk the ship. He was responsible for rationing supplies, for handling discipline, for navigating home through storms and ice. When mutiny brewed or scurvy set in or profits dwindled, it was his name in the ledger. Even within the warmth of his cabin, he might sit late into the night, candlelight flickering, wondering if they'd find whales at all, or whether the mast would hold in the next gale. Some captains, over time, became stern, distant. Others leaned too much into comfort, demanding luxuries their crews could not imagine. Fine china, wine, a private cook. These men were often resented, their cabins resented more, and yet this division between command and crew was ancient, expected, necessary, perhaps. In ports like Nantucket or New Bedford, some captains returned home wealthy. They built large houses, married into prominent families, invested in shipping companies or railroads. Others returned empty-handed or not at all. But while aboard the ship in the middle of the vast heaving sea, his world was this room, this small sanctuary of order amid chaos, a port in the storm. Now imagine the ship once again, the vast creaking hull, the ropes sighing with tension, the deck slick with salt, the hold dark and heavy with barrels of oil, and in the captain's cabin, a quiet scratch of pen on paper, a flicker of lamplight, and the hum of the sea pressing endlessly on all sides. Let your breath slow. Let that quiet settle in your bones. Because now, dear listener, the voyage comes to its end. Let us return gently and conclude this journey.